Good evening and welcome to Solidarity on Tap. My name is Chris Kerr with the Ignatian Solidarity Network. On behalf of everyone at ISN, as well as our national Solidarity on Tap sponsors, Mary Noel Lay Missioners, Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Great to have you. Great to be back here at Solidarity on Tap. We're ready to go. As many of you know, for over 15 years, the Ignatian Solidarity Network has been uniting the Ignatian family. That means the Jesuit network, as well as all those who are inspired to work for justice through the spiritual tradition of St. Ignatius of Loyola. We've been inviting them to build a more just world through transformational programs and resources that deepen faith and lead to dismantling systematic injustice, as well as collective action to defend and promote the inherent dignity of all God's creation, both people and planet, and collaborative initiatives that bridge divides and overcome exclusion. If you haven't already, please make sure to check out our website, ignatiansolidarity.net, and like and follow us on social media to get the latest advocacy alerts, educational resources, and much more, and get them via Twitter, Facebook, email, lots of different ways. So make sure to connect with us if you haven't already. Okay. Many of you know this, but for those joining us for the first time, let me give you the background on Solidarity on Tap. This isn't exactly how we'd like to be doing this. Okay. In a pre-COVID world, Solidarity on Tap usually took place in cities across the country, bringing together members of the Ignatian family in local bars and pubs to put social justice. Powerful speakers address crowds of people from across the Ignatian network in that local community, and it was a really great, powerful gathering that happened many places throughout the year. But like many things, we moved virtual in March of 2020, almost a year ago now, and it was a lot of fun. We had a good time, and so we thought we'd keep doing it, including continuing to do it here in 2021. And even though we're gathering virtually, the goal of Solidarity on Tap is the same: to invite people to enjoy fellowship, maybe with a drink in hand, and to hear powerful reflections from members of the network engaged in work for justice. So thanks for being here to be part of it tonight. And as always, in order to build and enjoy community this evening, I encourage you to utilize the comment section on Facebook or on YouTube, or post to Twitter or Instagram, and use the hashtag ISN Live to let us know you, your institution, your alma mater, your parish are represented here tonight. Okay. You can also post your comments and questions for our guest speaker this evening on Twitter or Facebook. So we want to hear from you. We want to know you're out there. All right, Ignatian family. Now, Solidarity on Tap conversations are typically a carefully curated recipe of serious conversation filled with opportunities to learn and grow in both heart and mind, sprinkled with some moments of humor, and always carried out with a vision of a hope-filled future. So with this in mind, I'm really excited to introduce our speaker tonight, Sister Tracey Horan. Tracey is a sister of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods in Indiana, and the Associate Director of Education and Advocacy for the Kino Border Initiative on the U.S.-Mexico border in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico, and Arizona. Her job includes the development and delivery of curricula that are attentive to both Catholic social tradition and the contemporary realities of border and migration policies, as well as the development and realization of an advocacy policy and plan for the Kino Border Initiative. She has ministered with Latinx migrant communities in a variety of contexts for the last decade. She previously worked as a teacher and then a community organizer, and recently celebrated 6 years as a religious sister. Sister Tracey is a graduate of the University of Dayton and grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm very excited to say welcome to Tracey. Tracey, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Well, here being in my room.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. I understand. I think that looks like.
It is. I have to confess. So I was kind of surprised when your invitation said I could bring a drink with me. And I was asking, I was asking the sisters. They were like, "Well, what are you going to bring? You want some wine or something?" And I was like, "Well, really, what I want is to sip a little bit of tequila." I was telling Chris that this is something I picked up in Mexico. Like I've never, the first time I tried it, I just couldn't handle the taste, but it's grown on me. So it's become my drink of choice.
And I understand it has medicinal aspects to it, right? So you can drink it feeling good, feeling bad, really anytime. It seems like tequila is appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, but the difference is you have to like sip it if you're really going to enjoy it, because here, in Mexico, it's quality tequila. So if you were to just, take a shot, you're not respecting the quality.
Right. So some people have told me that if you go to any town in Mexico, they will convince you they have the best tequila of any town in Mexico. Everybody has the best.
That sounds about right.
Exactly. So, well, again, welcome. We're glad to have you. Just fair warning, our last guest back in 2020 ended up on the Stephen Colbert Show a month or so later. So no pressure, but that's kind of what we're hoping for you after you get done with this. So
these are tough shoes to fill, Chris.
I know, but also, exciting to think about the potential of that, right? And all the good that could come from it when Stephen comes calling. So anyway, now you have been at the Kino Border Initiative for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about that. You have been at the Kino Border Initiative, working there longer during a pandemic than you experienced a non-pandemic reality, but probably long enough, at least, of both to kind of contrast. What has it been like working at this, NGO there, right on the Mexican side of the border that walks with people either being deported or people coming seeking asylum? What's it been like to do that in the midst of a global pandemic?
Man, it's been complicated. I would say, on a number of levels. First, because part of what we focus on in our work is accompaniment. And so with the education groups that come and just in encountering the migrants, the idea of being an encounter and creating space for people to share across difference, well, that becomes a lot more difficult to do when you have to wear face masks and keep 6 feet of distance and people with different accents. So all of the communication just becomes more challenging, just thinking of that part of it. So, I think a lot of us have felt just missing those interactions, because you would have kids that would just come up and hug you at the Migrant Aid Center, or, just really being able to pat somebody on the shoulder when they're like sharing their story with you. So all of that it's really hard, especially here in Mexico, when the greeting is like a hug and a kiss on the cheek. So it's like, we haven't done that for a year. So it really changes the dynamic. And I think the other piece that's hard is seeing how the pandemic has been used as a pretext to keep people from accessing immigration pathways. So it's been really hard. When I arrived a year and a half ago, people who were seeking asylum, for example, were waiting maybe a month was like the wait time before they would get processed. And then when the pandemic hit, and right when they were closing the ports of entry to asylum seekers, the wait had gotten longer to about 4 or 5 months. Well, at that point, everything has just been shut down. People are not being processed. So now we have people that at that point were waiting 5 months, and now it's been a year and a half. Some people were sharing with me today that they're coming up on like 2 years of waiting. So just walking with folks in that wait and that uncertainty, it's just a whole different experience from people coming and, they might be there for a few weeks or a month. So now people are really having to set up camp and just figure out what to do in the meantime. And so it's really tough to kind of be in that uncertainty with them.
Yeah, and the Kino Border Initiative, of course, has this whole kind of side of their ministry of welcoming people to the border to learn about the realities there too, which I would imagine is something you can't be doing very effectively during the pandemic. Can you tell us how you've tried to pivot on that?
Yeah, you can't do it in the same way. And there's just so much that happens. It's really hard to explain this bicultural context in words or even virtually, but it has been cool. And I think that's one of the things that really has inspired me, because we had a group, actually a high school, that reached out to us last spring when the pandemic really hit and everything was closing down and we had all of these cancellations. And they reached out and they said, our students really still want to do something. Could we try doing something virtual? And, because the request came from one of our schools and the kids were really excited, they had wanted to come down and visit us. We said, well, let's see what we can do. And so that kind of inspired us switching to virtual immersions, which are not the same, but it really has been impressive to me. I think about myself as a teenager, like, would I really have wanted to spend a few hours in front of a screen each day on my summer vacation? I don't know, but these kids show up and they have questions and they want to be connected. So it's really inspiring, and it's been surprising to me how much people have really taken advantage of the chance to do things virtually. And it's actually given some people a chance to connect who wouldn't have otherwise. We had a school that they had a student who is actually in Honduras right now, but because we were doing it virtually, she could be part of the experience, whereas before she wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah. So it creates some new opportunities amid kind of the challenge of it as well. That's great. I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about your story and things like that. But before I do that, I wanted to kind of welcome some of the folks that have joined us here online. We have Mary Kay is saying, greetings from Columbia, Maryland. Welcome, Mary Kay. Sarah Signorino says hello from Canisius College in Buffalo, New York. I know they've been a good partner of the Kino Border Initiative. Nelson is joining us from Los Angeles in a watch party with St. Mark's Young Adult Ministry. I know there are many folks in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles watching tonight, so welcome to Nelson and those folks. Abby says, go Tracey, sending love all the way from Chicago. And Sister Carolyn says, yeah, Tracey. All right, so welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight. Great to see you. Now, Tracey, can you tell us a little about how you got to be in Nogales at the Kino Border Initiative? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey, Sister of Providence? How did that all happen? Tell us more about all that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So when I was a community organizer, I was working mostly on immigration issues with a lot of folks in our local churches who were facing deportation and trying to really deal with this. The connections between the police and ICE at a local level. And I came to a point where I felt like it was time to move on to something different. And I wasn't really sure what that would be, but I just started exploring options. And around the same time, a good friend of mine who I had lived with in El Paso, Texas, a sister of charity named Janet Gilday, she was actually dying of cancer. And I remember it was hard because I couldn't make the trip out to El Paso for the funeral. And so I took some time to just kind of search online and like find videos of her or photos so that I could sort of do my own processing. And as I was searching things like Sister Border Ministry, the Kino Border Initiative came up. I wasn't actively looking for it, but it happened to be during the same time I was discerning my next step. And I just kind of clicked on it, and it happened that they had this ministry opening, and I honestly thought to myself, oh, well, the leadership's never going to go for this. It's so far away. We don't have Sisters of Providence out there, and I'm still in formation. But it caught my attention enough that I thought, maybe I'll just kind of investigate a little bit. And so I did, and I actually started applying, thinking in my mind, like, I don't think that our congregation will say yes to this. And it turned out that Sister Janet, they did have a service for her actually locally in Cincinnati that I could go to. And that was around the same time I was in this application process and discerning about what was next. And I remember the day of the funeral, I kind of looked into her picture and felt that she was really inviting me to come back to the border where I had, that's how I really got to know her. And the experience that I had with her really inspired me to become a sister. And it was just a couple hours after the funeral that I got a phone call from Joanna Williams, who is now my supervisor at KBI and was offering me the position. So it really felt spirit-led. And then my congregation, at the same time, our leadership was really trying to discern how they could be more supportive with everything that was happening at the border. And I came with this request. And so it all just kind of lined up, and it felt like a really spirit-led process. I wasn't looking to move far away. I was mostly applying for things in the Midwest, but all of the pieces lined up to the point that I reached out to one of the sisters on staff, and was asking about places to live. And we ended up having a phone call, and they said that I could live with them. And so, yeah, it was just really amazing to see those pieces come into play. And I think that's been true for me in a lot of pieces of my life when I wasn't seeking something out, but things aligned in a way that it just made it really clear what was next. So it's been a beautiful pathway.
That's a great story. And prior to this, or kind of earlier in your career, you were engaged in community organizing back home in Indiana. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that work?
Yeah, if you can imagine, like community organizing around immigration in Indiana is just not really the first thing you think of when you think of the Hoosier state. But man, it was amazing. And I think what was really cool about it, that was the first time I had done much work like on the interfaith level, working with rabbis and with all different Christian denominations, seeing these amazing Episcopal women priests and working with these Muslim congregations. So it was really neat because that was the first time I had seen people from different faiths coming together. And what we had in common was this desire for racial and economic justice that was really driving us. And I had really actually becoming an organizer was something that was like on my bucket list. Before I joined the congregation, I spent a year doing some volunteer work with Unite Here, so labor organizing. And I remember, I don't think I really understood what was going on or what it really meant, but I would get these invitations to go visit these workers at their houses from a friend that I got to know through the Catholic worker. And I remember at the beginning thinking like, you know, what are we doing? We just go to her house and just ask her questions. Like, isn't what we want for them to like get their benefits back? Shouldn't we talk about that? Don't we have a plan? But it was really this slow work of building relationship. And it just kind of caught fire in me, and to see the transformation over time, where the first time that we visited this woman's house, she had worked for this company 15 years and she lost her benefits, her vacation days, her sick days. And we came in and started asking questions, and she said things like, oh, well, you know, the company just has to do what they have to do. I understand, you know, it's not my manager's fault. It's just, you know, it's unfortunate. It's tough times. They have to cut where they can. And I just was so shocked. This woman who for 15 years had given her life to this company, who had a kid with special needs and was just struggling to make ends meet, how easily she accepted that reality. And then we come back and we're visiting, and a couple months later, we come in and she says, oh, you should have seen today. I went in and I gave my manager an earful because so-and-so wasn't paid for their overtime. And she was just like a different person. And so that was sort of where that spark ignited for me. And it never went away. And so when I was looking at my first ministry, that's I came back to that, and I really wanted to explore what it meant to empower people through building relationship and just asking questions, honestly, and helping them to see their worth. So it's been really cool to be able to do that.
And what would you say is the core concept of faith-based organizing? And I think you were with a Faith in Action affiliate there in Indiana. What's the core concept? I mean, I think it has something to do with helping people understand their own power. Is that really the integral idea?
Yeah, and I think it's a big piece of it is, you know, moving from the world as it is to the world as we believe it should be. And I think where faith plays a role is in part recognizing, you know, our own worth, believing that we're made in the image and likeness of God. You know, if we really believe that, then what's the life that we deserve? What are the rights that we deserve? So when you start with that foundation of people being God's creation, well, then there are certain things that just have to be true. Then families have to have the right to migrate, and people have to have dignified working conditions. And so it's a natural outgrowth of that belief. And I think it's also, you know, leaning in when things are hard too, having that faith background, that so congregation, you know, people come together in hard times, people come together to make things happen. Organizing doesn't happen in a solitary way. You can't win a ballot measure or, you know, increase voter turnout in a district by yourself. You know, you have to bring people into the fold. And there's so much of that that naturally overlaps with congregation life and with Christian life too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to ask you a little bit more about your congregation. But before I do that, we have some more folks out there. I just want to make sure we welcome them. So, uh, uh, Angel Angel from the Rio Grande Valley, another place on the border, says hello. Fatima says hello from Canisius. Welcome. Edwin says saludos desde San Diego. Welcome, Edwin. Let's see, who else? Oh, Barbara says, hi, Tracey. We loved our virtual KBI virtual experience in July. Thank you for all your hard work. Prayers from the University of Scranton. Excellent. Karen says, hello from the Maryknoll Lay Missioners. Welcome, Karen. Karen, glad to have you with us. Beth says, shout out for faith-based community organizing. Beth is joining us from St. Joseph's in Philadelphia. Welcome, Beth. Glad to have you with us. Mary says, greetings from Indianapolis. We miss you, Sister Tracey. Well, that's nice. And Joni says, watch party, Sisters of Providence and friends. All right. Well, that's a good one to ask you a little bit more about, to tell us a little bit about the charism of the Sisters of Providence of St. Mary of the Woods. I think many folks may not be familiar with the congregation. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of the DNA of your order?
Yeah, for sure. And I have to bring out my Mother Theodore cutout. I just keep her close. She's our foundress that came from France. She's watching us. She's always watching. Yeah, so our congregation started as teachers. So our roots are from France, and our foundress came in 1840. And over time, like a lot of congregations, when Vatican II happened, we branched out, and people were more following sort of where they felt called and where their gifts were. But we really have a legacy of empowering women's leadership, which is one of the things that's definitely drawn me to the Sisters of Providence. So our foundress really faced some challenges. So she came to Indiana when it was like a forest and showed up, and she actually said almost these words of like, you know, what am I supposed to do in this forest? I'm supposed to build a school. And so there's definitely this tradition of, you know, her words were, all appearances are against it. And so moving forward against all odds and working for justice against all odds is in our DNA. And in her early years, she had a challenge with a bishop who they think maybe had some mental issues, but he, when she was out of town, he tried to elect a different general superior. The sisters all voted for her anyway. But at one point, he actually locked her in a closet, trying to sort of control her. So it really, what impressed me about that is that she always responded with this care and concern for him, really concerned about his well-being. And she also spoke her truth. And so for me, at times when I've actually struggled with, you know, what does it mean to be a woman religious in the Catholic Church? I think about her, and I think about her ability to persevere in her own truth and have compassion at the same time. I think that really embodies kind of who we are. And our tagline is love, mercy, justice. I think we're pretty well known for our justice stances. And then we also have an eco-justice center. So that connectedness with Earth is a big part of who we are too.
Yeah, I remember being a college campus minister and so grateful to be able to send students to the White Violet Eco Justice Center in Indiana as
cool.
experience of eco spirituality. So we're so grateful for that ministry and the ministry of all the sisters. And Sister Carolyn said, breaking boundaries, creating hope, she says. So yeah. And also Irene says hello from the Maryknoll Lay Missioners, and Carol says they're having a Fate family watch party. We're so inspired by you, Tracey, and thankful for Solidarity on Tap. Well, we're thankful to have you with us too, Carol. Thank you. Now, Tracey, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what's happening at the border. You mentioned you were talking with folks today. Folks are waiting, seeking asylum, and of course, you do this every day, encountering folks at the Commodore and things like that there at KBI. Can you tell us a little bit more? You kind of delved into this a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about what's happening at the border right now.
Yeah, so it's really a tough moment. As you know, some of the executive orders came out yesterday, and migrants, we've had a lot of hope, thinking about this transition to a new administration and all of the damage that was done by the Trump administration, and just a lot of folks seeking asylum, that their process has just come to a standstill. And so we were talking today about how much folks are struggling in Nogales as people become more desperate. We're seeing more extortion, more threats, more violence, especially for migrants, because they're vulnerable. There was a woman who came in today, and she said that, she had tried to cross through the desert, actually with her two boys, and was detained by immigration. She requested, when she was detained, she said, I really want to share my story. I really want someone to take down my testimony that I'm afraid to return to my country, and I'm fleeing violence, which, usually according to international and US law, she should have access to a fear assessment. But instead they said, no, there's no access to asylum right now. They returned her to Mexico, and within a few hours, she had been followed by someone, and had been warned that she should be careful with her older son because he could be recruited by the gangs. So, and her story is just one of many. So people are just trying to bide their time and figure out what to do as they're waiting. So it's like this struggle, because people were really hopeful that there would be change. And then, even myself, I thought, at the least with these executive orders, we'll hear that the Remain in Mexico policy is going to be over, and they'll start processing people who have been waiting for 2 years, that we're really going to see some concrete steps. And we didn't. So it's really hard. It's hard to sit with people in that. And in the meantime, those policies that have been in place are continuing. And so we're still seeing those abuses. We're still seeing people being returned under Title 42, which means, if they cross through the desert, they don't have any due process. They're just brought right back to Mexico. And so for people who have experienced threats in Mexico to be returned right back, it's just really scary. So it's hard, because we want to be hopeful, and some of the messages we're getting from the administration give us reason to hope. And at the same time, there is this urgency, because every day, one of the women was telling me today, she doesn't know how much longer she can hold out. Her kids have already gone 2 years without going to school. She has a son that has a medical condition, and they're actually US citizens, and she isn't. And so you have these families with mixed status, but they can't cross together. So it's really hard to sit with those stories. And I even said with the woman that was sharing today about that had been returned to Mexico and had requested asylum, I said to her, in my book, you should have been processed. You should be in the US. You shouldn't have to come back and live with this fear. But unfortunately, I don't get to make that decision at this point. So it's really sitting with people in the hard reality and continuing to work for something different. It's cool to see how the migrants have been organizing. So we have this Save Asylum campaign. And just today we were strategizing a little bit about doing this kind of national day of action to keep this urgency up. And I said, the people that are making decisions need to feel the way that you do about what every day that you wait means for you and your family. And so it's been amazing to see how people have stepped up and continued to lead this work and organize, even in these conditions where we really say, I give up, and I've given everything I can. So it's inspiring and hard at the same time.
Yeah. I want to ask you a little bit more about that, Tracey, but what I'd like to do is take a quick break just to share a little bit about our sponsors, and also a couple opportunities to connect with ISN coming up. So I'm gonna tell you to just take a little break, another sip of tequila, and we'll be right back. Okay, don't worry. All right. So, folks, I'd like to share some ways that you can connect with the Ignatian Solidarity Network. We're so grateful to have all of you with us tonight. First, I wanted to invite you to get ready for Lent. Did you know it begins in just 2 weeks from today? Ash Wednesday is coming quickly, all right? So we have an incredible daily Lenten series planned with amazing writers from across the country, including Father Brian Massengale, Sister Norma Pimentel, and some previous Solidarity on Tap guests like Father Greg Boyle, Dr. Marcia Chatelain, Father James Martin, and Olga Segura. You can subscribe to this free daily series at igsol.net/steadfast. That's STEAD fast, FAST. It's on the screen as well. Why am I reading it off? I don't know. Anyway, let's. I also want to tell you about a couple opportunities related to Black History Month, which is happening this right now, February. During this month, we urge you to join us in 2 opportunities to dive into Catholic Black history and racial justice. First, we'd like to encourage you to check out the Racial Justice Novena, which highlights the legacy of Black Catholic saints and holy men and women, in addition to other Catholics who worked for racial justice. The novena calls upon the witness and example of their lives to draw us into prayer as we commit to action for racial justice and equity. And you can check it out at the first link on the screen there, igsol.net/novena. And then secondly, we'd also like to invite you to join our 21-day Racial Equity Challenge to learn, pray, and take action for racial equity. You'll receive an email each day for 21 days that will challenge you to enter into the complex world of understanding the realities of racial injustice and anti-Blackness in the U.S. And you could subscribe to this at igsol.net/21challenge. It's on your screen there. It's the second link. So we hope you will walk with us in those journeys during this Black History Month going on right now. I'd also like to tell you about our sponsors. We have some wonderful sponsors that make Solidarity on Tap possible each month. First of all, the Mary Knoll Lay Missioners, who work internationally with those at the margins for a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world. To learn more about their work, join their Meet a Missioner Monday live streams on their Facebook page every Monday at 11 o'clock Eastern Time. So make sure to check those out. Mondays at 11 a.m. Eastern. We also have the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, JVC, which is a full-time volunteer program that works for social justice while exploring spirituality and faith through a framework of Catholic Ignatian values for individuals between the ages of 21 and 35. And you can learn more about JVC at jesuitvolunteers.org. And JVC Northwest, which is focused on the core values of community, simple living, social and ecological justice, and spirituality and reflection. JVC Northwest is a national direct AmeriCorps program serving in 24 locales across Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. And you must be 21 or over to be eligible for JVC Northwest. So, and you can check them out at jvcnorthwest.org. We also want to invite you to join us for future Solidarity on Taps in 2021. So keep an eye out for that at igsol.net/SOT. For updates, you can subscribe to receive emails about each Solidarity on Taps. We'd love to have you get connected in that way. I also wanted to let you know that if you like the conversation this evening with Tracey and want to share it or watch it again, this and all our previous Solidarity on Tap videos are available at ignatiansolidarity.net or on our YouTube or Facebook pages, so make sure to check those out. Also, if you enjoy Solidarity on Tap or really anything that ISN does, please consider giving a gift to sustain the work of the Ignatian Solidarity Network, and you can do that at ignatiansolidarity.net/donate. And back to, I mentioned social media and sharing on social media at the beginning, but you can share a picture of yourself watching or having a Zoom virtual watch party to your Instagram account and tag at Ignatian Solidarity. Plus, make sure to use that hashtag ISN Live. Right? We want to be able to feature your photo in our next Instagram story about Solidarity on Tap. So make sure to do that. Okay. Now we're going to invite Tracey back, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about what's happening at the border. One of the things that I think may be hard for people to understand is that as those who have come to the border from points south, other parts of Mexico or Central America, let's say, or even other parts of the hemisphere, as well as people who are have been deported and are kind of waiting, hoping to re-enter on the Mexican side. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about, what is their day-to-day life? You mentioned the mom sharing the story of her children not being in school for 2 years. So what is, especially for families, what is the day-to-day reality of life for folks in that situation?
Yeah, right now, I mean, it's obviously each person is unique. For a lot of the folks who are like waiting long term for asylum, they're pretty much just going. I mean, maybe you might say like some people in quarantine in the U.S., but in a different way, just going between work and home. I know a lot of them, and it's a little different in Nogales than it would be in, like, say, Matamoros or other places on the border where you would see sort of these big tent encampments of people that are waiting for asylum. Well, in Nogales, it's a little more hidden. So people tend to, like, they might pool their money together, maybe try to get some resources from family or friends in the US with 2 or 3 families and rent one room. So they might have, like, each family might have a bed or a bunk bed or something. And so for a lot of them, if they've been able to find work, we have a lot of families that the mom might come get food at our migrant aid center while the dad's working, and they might switch depending on which days. And then the kids mostly are staying in for safety. And so a lot of them, if they can't afford to pay for internet, then right now they can't access school. So that I think that's one of the things a lot of the moms and dads tell us is it's really hard. I think some of them have gotten a little more accustomed to just being inside all of the time, but it's really hard, especially when you don't feel safe with your kids going out because of some of the organized crime activity and people being targeted. So really just staying in. And then some of the people that are being returned, so it's not technically a deportation under Title 42. There's no due process. They're just being returned. A lot of folks we're seeing, they're getting returned at night between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And it's happened like every other day for the past couple of weeks, actually. And so those people, sometimes they end up sleeping outside. They arrive to Mexico and they don't know where to go or where to find a shelter. There was a group of 40-some people who were returned last week. And a few of them, were trying to walk to find shelter, and where the cemetery is. And this group of men just came out and accosted them and robbed them. And so it is, there's just, people will say to me, even people who are from Mexico that traveled north, they're living in a place that they don't know. So they don't know who they can trust. They don't know, where they can go to seek help necessarily. We're grateful that a lot of people do make it to us because the word kind of travels through the grapevine, or they might hear from the Mexican immigration officials that they can find help with us. But just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of, having to be guarded, spending a lot of time and energy just figuring out how to be safe and move through the world safely, and just meet basic needs, I would say, is how a lot of folks spend their energy.
Yeah. And of course, you must have a lot of folks share stories of some of the reasons that they've come to the border, seeking asylum. Is there a story that has touched you recently or struck you or really stuck with you in some way that you might be able to give us a little insight into?
Yeah, there was a family that came from Honduras just a couple weeks ago, and the dad and the daughter had come like a year previously. So the family had faced threats from the gangs, and they actually had 3 family members who were murdered at the hands of organized crime. And so 2 members of the family are now in the US in their asylum process. The daughter actually has special needs. And so the mom then came later with the 2 boys once they could get enough resources to also travel north. And, they tried to cross through the desert, and this coyote, or the guide that was crossing them, said that, the older kids would need to cross separately. And so they actually separated the son, and he crossed, and then the mom and the other son crossed later, and they were detained and sent back, and ended up at our migrant aid center. But by the time they got to us, the older son, it had been 5 or 6 days and they still hadn't heard from him. They didn't know what was going on. And so, it turned out that he had ended up at a shelter in the US, but he didn't have any phone numbers memorized for his family members. And so he had no way of contacting anyone to tell them he was okay. So it was beautiful to be able to be part of that. And to see her face when she finally found out where he was and that he was okay. Because I think in part because, what she shared was not only the violence, but after all of that happened with her family, then they lost everything in the hurricane that happened. So I think it's, too, seeing families where it's like, it's just multiple factors that are combining to make things really, really tough. And then, all of the unexpected things that happen when they get to the border. So I was grateful that they ended up with a positive outcome of being able to connect him with his dad, who's in the US, so that they could reunite. But just seeing the fear in her face of saying, like, it's been 5 days, I don't know where my son is. It's something that you don't forget. That's for sure.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that. We had a question from Heidi. She asked, in this time when we are becoming more distant physically, and in some ways in our country right now, we also are distant ideologically in a lot of cases. How do you recommend we invite others to the margins and to welcome the stranger? And, you even touched on this a little bit in your introduction, talking about the realities of COVID and working there on the border, where you feel a little bit more disconnected with folks because you can't embrace and you can't see people's faces. And I think how important body language is and communicating and things like that. Like, how do we, any thoughts on how we find ways for people to, connect a little bit more, especially connect with those who are kind of on the periphery of society right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say even, when I think about people that are in detention, whether they're waiting for asylum or whether they've been detained and they're fighting their case to try to stay with their family in the US, there was already an inherent disconnection. So I think too, it's brought to light, some of the disconnect that already existed that people who are on the margins sometimes have to overcome. But one thing that's been really beautiful is we have some volunteers that previously they would visit detention centers. And I got to do that a couple of times myself, which is really emotional. But seeing the way that people who are in prison and maybe only are allowed out of their cell 1 hour a day, just the impact that any kind of connection has on folks that feel like they've been forgotten or ignored or just thrown away by society. And so what's been cool is that they can continue in contact through letter writing. And so we have some really faithful volunteers who keep lists of people who are in the Arizona detention centers and really keep in contact with them, send books to them, and really try to just that presence of like having a letter that comes to you personally and that you can open and know that another human being wrote it. And sometimes those like longstanding relationships with people who are detained for, it could be up to a couple of years. It's beautiful to see how that's been really a source of connection for folks that's been just invaluable. So that's one way that like comes to mind for me.
Yeah, that's great. And Tracey, we had another question. Someone asked, they said, prior to the election or during the debates, then candidate Biden actually talked about the situation of asylum seekers during one of the presidential debates, right? And then just when the executive orders on immigration came out this week, the administration talked about the idea of creating a humane asylum system. But yet, as you noted, we're nowhere near that right now. We very little progress was made this week for asylum seekers. So what is the message that the Biden administration and other leaders in our federal government need to be hearing, if we really want to be kind of walking with, accompanying asylum seekers in their journey towards accessing this legal right?
Yeah. Actually, I think the best way that I've heard this response was from a couple of migrants. We were kind of having a conversation today. This Cuban couple, the woman leads side, just an amazing, powerful woman. And we were talking about, what is it you would say if President Biden or his leadership was here in front of you? And she said, so the executive orders, if you haven't seen them, there's a lot about like reviewing policies, investigating policies, considering eliminating policies. So it's very, policy talk for like, we're not taking action. And she said, we don't need any reviews. We need action. She's like, this is not the time for review. You've had plenty of time for that. It's time for action. And I think that was really a great way of putting it. And in addition to that, her husband was saying that, what I wish would happen is for him to come here, and I would like him to come here, and I would like to invite him to come stay with me and see what it's like in my shoes for a week, and see what kind of action he would take then. And so I think it just really underlines just this distance between the action that's taken by people in these positions of power and the reality on the ground. So yes, we have hope because new people aren't being sent back to Mexico under the Remain in Mexico program. And yes, like these great ideas about what this new asylum system can look like. But the reality is people have been waiting for too long. And every day is another day that they're not with their families. Every day is another day that they might be kidnapped or extorted. And so it's the moment for action. And I think just that sense of urgency is really what I've heard people, the migrants lift up, and that they would love to see people in decision-making roles, live what they're living and then see what their response would be. Would they still want to review a policy or do a study or do an investigation, or would they be ready to start actually processing people, which we know they have the capacity to do.
And that the pandemic, yes, it's true. We're all living in a global pandemic, and but so are communities living at the border there, right? Who are seeking asylum,
Mm-hmm.
and so we figured out the way to do lots of things in our society over the past year amidst the global pandemic, whether it's attending professional sports events or, we could probably figure this out if we put our mind to it, right?
Yeah. And one of the other things that they brought up was that they see the cars going into the U.S. every day. They watch as those, U.S. citizens and residents, they're crossing back and forth like it's nothing because they're considered essential travel. And yet folks who've been waiting here a year wouldn't even be considered. And are just, shown the door right away. So we're pretty selective about when the pandemic really, really matters. And as I understand it, most of the federal officials have now been vaccinated. So, it's just, there's a way. It's just, interesting things become convenient when we want to use the pandemic as a reason to exclude people.
Somebody asked, Tracey, amid kind of all these really challenging, stories that you encounter and kind of walking with folks during these really challenging times, how do you take care of yourself?
I run. We have a field by our house, and actually we have a dog. So playing with the dog is really great because it's just so mindless. You just like throw a toy and he brings it back. But the other day I was really feeling stressed about the executive orders. And I just said to the sisters I live with, I need to go run or I'm going to go crazy. And so just getting that energy out. It's also a beautiful thing about religious life. This is the first time I've lived with sisters that were in the same ministry and we're living together. So, in the evening we come home and we debrief together, and like, I can cry about what I heard today or, share my frustrations about the executive orders, and like, they get it. And so there is that like great camaraderie and the strength of like community life that it's hard for me to imagine doing this ministry if I didn't have such, have community life as a support.
Yeah. And somebody asked really quickly, how they might sign up to send letters to folks
cool.
in detention.
Well, they could send me an email.
Or a website they can visit, or
probably the easiest would actually be send me an email.
We'll post your email in the chat. That'll work.
Very
That's
cool.
great. Excellent.
Oh, exciting.
Excellent. And we just real quick, I just want to say welcome to a few other folks. Welcome to Bud, who's joining us from San Diego and the St. Thomas More Society and Catholic Bar Association there. Saludos and welcome. Bienvenidos to John Paul Ramirez in Los Angeles. Welcome, John Paul. And then let's see. Oh, and Linda, Providence associate with Sister Tracey's community. So welcome to Linda. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Great to have everyone here this evening. And Tracey, real quick before we finish up, I just want to ask you, I think I have a sense of what this the answer to this might be, but we ask all of our guests towards the end of our time together, because sometimes we talk about really serious things and the struggles that our fellow people of God are kind of walking through and stuff like that. But what gives you hope in your work and in your life? What gives you hope?
I would say a couple of things. First, being part of witnessing migrants sort of like take hold of their power and march and share their stories and say, Mr. Biden, not one more day. That's beautiful to me, because I also see them in their moments of struggle and heartbreak. And then I see them, rise to the occasion of organizing. The other piece too is sometimes I think about my own journey. So I actually, in my high school days, I actually advocated to build the wall. I was really, all of my influences were like, people are breaking the law. And so I had that moment when I had sort of a come to Jesus moment and had to research, why I really believed that. And that, so to see my own conversion over the past, 10, 15 years, and I'm a pretty stubborn person. So if I can be converted, and if this person who 15 years ago said we should definitely build a wall is living 2 blocks away from one, and if I could do anything, I would love to rip it out of the ground, then anything's possible. So that gives me hope too, thinking about my own transformation and the fact that, change is possible.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight, Tracey. This was wonderful. I really enjoyed this conversation. So grateful for the work of you and your colleagues at the Kino Border Initiative, such an important partner for the Ignatian Solidarity Network. And so thank you to all of you for that ministry. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us. We're glad to have you back here in 2021, and great to have so many questions and to see so many folks from around the country joining us this evening for Solidarity on Tap. So thanks to everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.